So, Tim, I'm going to ask you to clap 3 times. As soon as I say clap 3 times, as soon as I say times, you do the clap as soon as possible afterwards. We've got to throw some ideas out there.
All right.
Any preferences for who goes first? Or
I'm happy to go first. In fact, I think you've gone first the last couple of times.
no, didn't you go first last time? Because you were really confident you had a good idea and you wanted to go first, and it was a real stinker.
Oh, that's true. Actually, that's true. Let's go with you. Well remembered.
No, but that also means that you're probably going to go last, though. So if your last idea is no good, it means we end on a low.
No, that's true. Okay, I'm starting.
All right.
Look, my first podcast idea is a podcast called My First Car. And it's a podcast where people come on and
Hang on. I reckon I know what this is about. Do people come on and discuss their first car?
They do.
That's a great idea, man. That's a great idea.
The wonderful thing about this idea is that we have all sorts of emotional attachments, I think, attached to our first car
Oh, yeah.
that perhaps we don't have with subsequent cars.
That is a superb idea.
All right, I'm saving that for last. Let's do something else for a while.
It's okay because you're not going last, so it's good to start on a strong one.
I'm glad you think it's a good idea. I think it's a great fun idea.
So, Tim, I obviously need no introduction to your first car because in many ways I consider your first car to also be my first car by default because I was driven around in it so often and it was such a fabulous car. But for the sake of those people who don't know, and I think it's a shame that there's anyone in the world that doesn't know about your first car, tell us about your first car.
You have built it up quite a bit. My first car was a Renault.
Was it a Renault 12 or?
Yeah, Renault 12.
Yeah.
And
better known as the Renault.
just the Renault, yeah. I gave it a pretentious name, which is Harriet.
Yeah, that never stuck.
No. It has a fun connection. It comes from the poem read by Mike Myers in the film So I Married an Axe Murderer, which is a really funny film.
God, you got your retro film reference in early this week.
Oh, wow. It's a very efficient show, this one.
We will put a photo of the Renault in the notes for the show as well if you want to see it. Because this
Absolutely.
It was a total bomb, wasn't it?
Well, no, hang on a second. It was the most beautiful, legendary of first cars. It had some unique features. Look, I was pumping petrol at a place in Adelaide, and I was paid $4.50 an hour or something in Australian dollars to pump petrol, which meant that if I got an iced coffee or something, I lost half an hour's wages. It was unbelievable. And a lady came in with a car, and I was pumping petrol, and I just thought it looked quirky and gorgeous, and I was putting petrol in and I said, would you like to sell your car? And she said, you know what? My husband's been saying to me, we should sell this car. And I ended up buying it for $500. Couldn't believe it, actually. So I bought it and, it was a gorgeous little car.
How would you describe its condition and physical appearance?
The fact that I had it for about 3 years and then it died on me and the wrecker took it away probably says all you need to know. It was in the last 3 years of its life. But I thought it was, as you do. Well, this is one of the charms of your first car is you think it's a chariot. You really do. It's like you can't believe, well, I couldn't believe I was driving myself around, that I owned something.
And driving me around.
And driving you around.
Basically, that $500 not only bought your freedom, it bought my freedom.
You had an Uber deal going 25 years before I was your Uber driver.
You were on call.
Yeah, we had some adventures in the Renault. One of the charms of it as well is it was around the time that River Phoenix died. And I don't know if you remember this or not. I'm sure you
Yes,
do.
I do. I'm surprised you want to talk about this black spot on the Renault's history.
It will be in the photo. So I thought it would be charming to, or I don't know what, honouring or artistic or creative to draw a picture of River Phoenix's face on the side of the Renault.
Oh, God.
So that was there right to the end, this picture of River Phoenix. And it came from, a girl once said that I looked a bit like River Phoenix and I just couldn't let that go. You know, you hold on to things and you go, wow, that's really something. And then he sadly died, and it just made it bittersweet and a bit like James Dean, although not at all like James Dean. James Dean, of course, has been immortalised in many ways. River Phoenix managed to get onto the side of the Renault. Yeah, and we took it and we drove that thing everywhere.
Oh.
And I drove you everywhere.
My favourite Renault story, and there are many, many Renault stories, is when you had like a little bingle with the truck, didn't you? Like you had like a little minor car accident and it wasn't your fault. and the truck driver was realised that he'd damaged this kid's car and he was in the wrong, and he looked at your car, which had like scratches down the side of it, and thought, this car's just a wreck. Like, it's already a wreck. What am I going to do? And didn't he like offer you $500 on the spot? And that was like the price of the car. So you took the $500 and never got the stuff repaired. So that truck driver just paid for your car by crashing into you.
That's almost true. The guy got back to the depot and his manager called me and he looked into the insurance. I got a quote and he said, well, how about I just give it to you? And I said, that's great. So it paid for itself. One of the cool things I remember we had as well is we had you remember inside, when I say we, as if it was the family car, the Tim and Brady family car.
I did consider it partly my car, as you're aware.
Remember we had the list of all the McDonald's venues around Adelaide. And I managed to find that in a magazine. I cut that out and laminated it, and we had that stuck to the dashboard so that we weren't too far from a McDonald's.
Yeah, we always knew where the nearest McDonald's was. That just shows how old we are because, there were no smartphones and things like that. If you wanted to figure out where the nearest McDonald's was, you couldn't just put it into Apple Maps.
Oh, no.
We would just look on the list that was laminated on the dashboard and go, oh, look here, Tim, there's one at the corner of South Road and Marion Road. Let's head there.
That's right. This was also in the days perhaps before Maccas were on every horizon that you could look in any major city on earth. But it seemed like a cool thing.
I don't exactly remember how the Renault came to its demise. I remember at one stage when you were thinking of getting rid of it, we considered the idea of trying to put it in a backyard and filling it with water and turning it into a massive aquarium. But there was just so many holes in it, we knew that it would leak like a sieve.
I still think that's a great idea. That someone could do an installation. Yeah. We were modern artists, man.
Yeah, I was going through an aquarium phase at that stage.
You were, yeah.
Seeing I considered it my car, I thought I could use it for whatever art I wanted.
I just come home one day and it's an aquarium. But look, what happened was it was very unspectacular in the end. I was driving along on Marion Road and I took off at the lights at one point and something just went thud, like underneath me. And I had it towed home and a person came to look at it and said, look, it's the axle. And I can't even remember what he said, but something...
He said, we're not sure how this happened, Tim, but there seemed to be a whole bunch of angelfish in your transmission.
That's right. Have you been using this car as an aquarium? He basically says, look, it's all seized up. It won't go. Yeah. I may as well take it away. But of course, being a wrecker, thinking back now, he had a vested interest in coming to that particular diagnosis.
He gave you money for it, didn't he?
Yeah, but it wasn't much. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't another $500, unfortunately.
No. The car that just keeps on giving you $500 every... like this money machine. It's an ATM.
I know what it was. It was one of those deals where he said, I won't charge you for towing it away.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, oh, that's a relief.
Oh, cheeky bugger.
And really, I know. And he's just got a car for free.
I'm surprised you fell for that because, when we were at that age, I would have considered you a lot more streetwise than me and you wouldn't have fallen for that. I would have fallen for that, but I'm surprised you fell for that.
Yeah. Look, it's only this moment I'm looking back and going, oh, yeah, hang on, that probably wasn't a good deal, was it?
You should go look him up and demand money.
Well, that's right. It's probably out there somewhere. It would be so funny to find it. In fact, you had an idea once, years later, didn't you? We should go and make a short film about looking for the Renault and going all over the place to see if we can find it in car yards.
That's another podcast.
Yes, searching for the Renault.
Oh, yeah. Oh, imagine finding that. I think if we found that, I would probably weep.
I would buy it. I would turn it into an aquarium just to prove the point.
I'd be bidding against you for it. We'd be driving the cost up, just the two of us.
Well, seeing you're not very street smart, maybe I'll just say, look, man, I won't charge you to take it away. And you'll be like, oh, okay. Yeah, so the Renault, we had a lot of adventures on that. And
great car.
Some of them, I don't know if they're to be repeated. Some of them driving without license or on L's late at night in the hills. And
we'll save them for another day. We'll save them for...
I don't know what the statute of limitations is on driving without your license or driving as an L plater with a P plater.
I think there's probably a special case when you're trying to save someone from getting done for drink driving.
Well, no, you didn't have to mention that.
Okay, you can drop me in it. To be honest, let's be clear here. No laws were broken. I was not an L plater. I just was inexperienced on a manual car.
Oh.
It was legal for me to drive, and it was obviously illegal for you to drive. So I said, all right, I'll take the helm. So no laws were broken. We were very sensible young men.
That was sensible.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to then your first car.
Yeah, my first car doesn't have like as good stories as yours, because yours was like our first car. But I did get not many people would know this if they're not Australian, but I got a car called a Holden Barina. And I'm not going to tell a bunch of stories about my first car now just because we're running out of time. But there is one interesting thing about my first car that has become an interesting story for many years. And that is my car, this Barina, only had one rear view mirror. It had a rear view mirror on the driver's side, which is the right-hand side of the car because we're in Australia. And that's how it was made. It was just made to have one rear view mirror. It didn't have one on the left. You would use the other top. I'm talking about wing mirrors here, by the way, when I say rear view mirror. It had a right wing mirror. And it also obviously had a rear view mirror inside above the windscreen. And that's how you would get the rest of the perspective around the car. That was deliberately how these cars were made, right?
Yeah, wow. That's
It's not that common. So anyway, years and years later, I was telling my wife about my first car because, as you have recognised with your idea, Tim, people love talking about their first cars.
Yeah.
I was telling her all about my first car and reminiscing. And I told her how it had this one mirror. And she absolutely did not believe me. She absolutely thought I had either misremembered or it was like a defect in the car or, I'd been had. And it was this real sticking point. And I went through all my old photos and found old photos of the car, but all the old photos I had of the car only showed it from the side that had the mirror. And I couldn't find proof. And then one day on the internet, I just went on this like mad search for old pictures of these cars from the day, and I found a whole bunch of examples of the car not having a wing mirror on the left. And I showed it to her and said, "Look, here's my proof." And it was a great victory for me to finally have like this vindication and prove myself right. And I, thinking that she'd be like, well, mea culpa, you've got a great memory, Brady. But she was just like, wow, that really was a crap car. Just getting back to the podcast idea, though, I think like the last few minutes have shown what a great idea this is. And I'm imagining you'll say, you'll get just different guests on all the time to talk about their first car would be because I don't think you and I could just talk about the Renault and the Barina for like 50 episodes. Well, maybe we could, but I'm not sure people would listen. But it'd be great just to get all your friends and guests and people on to talk about their first car. That'd be great.
Can I make one more comment about the mirror that you were referring to?
Or the non-mirror. The non-mirror.
Well, the non-mirror. I think it was ironic that you were being accused of having a blind spot for the very item on the car that's designed for you not to have a blind spot.
You cast all the aspersions you like, Tim. You're the one who sideswiped your car.
Sideswiped? On who? On who?
Wasn't it a sideswipe your crash with the truck?
Oh, yes. But he changed into my lane. And I think about that every time I drive past that Plus. He changed lanes into me.
Well, I remember the real controversy of it, just to get a little bit inside baseball. The real controversy of that crash was the fact that you had just gotten another part-time job where you had to deliver a bunch of magazines. And your car had the magazines in it. But rather than going and doing the job, you came to the other side of town to pick me up first so that we could have an adventure. And when your dad found out that you'd had a crash driving to pick up Brady when you were supposed to be dropping a bunch of magazines off on the whole other side of town, he was really mad at you.
That is true, but that is a whole other crash. That was when I went up the back of someone. Oh, that was terrible. I dropped something on the floor, like a cassette tape on the floor, and I bent down to pick up the cassette tape to put in, Pearl Jam or something like that. Yeah. And I looked up, and then bang, I hit the car in front of me who had stopped to turn right or something like that. Yeah. So I pushed the radiator back. Yeah, Dad was furious. What are you doing on this side of town? I said, I'm going to get Brady. He's like, aren't you supposed to be delivering those magazines?
But Brady needed picking up.
So Dad towed me home in his Toyota Crown with a piece of seatbelt, and that's hilarious. Your father drove because Dad would accelerate enormously, and I would be pulled along like someone had rammed me in a Dodgem car, and then I'd nearly hit him, and then he'd slam on the brake, and so we just somehow made our way across home. To home.
You never did pick me up.
No, I didn't get to your house that day. And again, I know the exact spot, and I was there the other day where that accident happened. I pointed it out to my wife.
Your dad. It's a shame your dad had to tow you home. You could have called that scrap guy. He gives you good deals on towing.
He The place where you bought your Barina has recently been transformed into a Mercedes-Benz dealership.
Wow.
So,
well, that rules me out of that place then.
I'm trying to remember the name of the salesperson that sold you that car 25 years ago.
Oh, yeah. It was Mario Carboni.
Carboni, yes, that's right. Legend.
Because when he sold me the car, which I'd spent thousands and thousands of dollars on, and I signed it, and he handed over the keys, he then also handed me like a bucket and a free car washing kit with like a sponge and a chamois and soap in it, and gave me a wink and said, "Here's a little something on us." And like I just thought he was the most generous, greatest guy ever because he gave me this free car washing kit.
It was like 50 cents for a big W.
Great idea.
Cool.
Great idea. I would be totally up for that one. I'm not a car person, and I think maybe in some ways it would be a better podcast done by people who aren't car people. Like I wouldn't want to listen to that and hear people going, "Oh, so was it a was it a V6 4.7 or was it and what was the mileage you would get on that?" Like I don't want to know that. I just want to know the human stories.
Did it have extractors?
Extractors. We're getting a bit in-jokey there, man.
We still don't know what extractors are, do we?
Basically, the reason I'm advocating this podcast being non-technical is because you and I both know pretty much nothing about cars.
No. I don't even know what went wrong with the car that I allowed someone to go away with it for free.
He's probably still driving it. He probably looked inside the engine and found like a hidden gold bar in there and just came out and told you, it's broken.
Like, oh, okay. Well, this guy's great.
He found the welcome stranger in the carburetor. That would explain why it went so slow.
Let's move on. What's your idea? What do you got?
All right, Tim. Well, this episode has a sponsor, and that is Anchor, which is this new app that I didn't know about until very recently. And if you'd like to check it out, go to anchor.fm. How are we going to explain what this is? It's kind of like it's really good for people who want to listen to, but also people who want to make their own podcasts. I've heard it described as like a sort of a Twitter of podcasting, but I'd call it more like an Instagram or Snapchat of podcasting myself. This is an app. It's like a recording studio in your pocket, and you can listen to podcasts, but you can also make your own using just your phone. You can just pull out your phone out on the spot. You could interview someone. You can make your own recording. You can integrate music into it. I'm a bit overwhelmed by this in terms of describing what it is. What do you think of it? You've had a look at it, Tim.
Oh, I think it's the reason I like this. This is an app that if you told me this kind of thing would exist when I was a kid, I would have been so excited because it's like your own radio station.
It is. You can be your own like DJ out on the road and make whatever you like. What they want you to do is download Anchor onto your iOS, onto your phone, or an Android app. Or you can just go and find out more by going to anchor.fm and read all about it. It's 100% free. You don't need to be experienced. You don't need to be good at making podcasts. The funny thing about this is we've been setting up to do this recording here, and we've got all these cables everywhere. We've got 2 computers. We've got 2 microphones. We've got all these pop shields. We've got all this stuff to make this recording. What we should be doing is just using Anchor on one phone, which we actually haven't thought to do, but people listening can do it. And I think the sort of people listening to this podcast probably will like Anchor, because I think people listening to this podcast are the sort of people who like quite fancy making something themselves, but have been a bit intimidated until now. And I think this is sort of removing the intimidation factor.
Yeah, I like this. You can also share the other content as well. So there's channels to listen to with news and all those sorts of things that come in, and songs that you want to add in. So it really is like your own radio station.
Yeah, they've got this integration with Spotify and sort of Apple Music. So I think you could do something like pretend you're like a DJ going, okay, now here's another song, and you can talk about the music you like. Or you could just make a podcast about something boring like cricket or the things that you're into, which are probably quite boring.
How is cricket boring? We've just spent days at the cricket together.
No. Well, you and I don't think cricket's boring, but you know what I mean.
I loved it. When I was a kid, I sort of designed something like this with 2 cassette players. Because my mum had a radio show.
That's a very early app.
Oh, it was still less equipment than we have in front of us today.
Yeah.
But my mum had a radio program on local community radio for children's, and I got to read the story every now and then as a kid.
How have I not heard this story until now?
Oh, yeah, it was called the Sunshine Club. And my mum read it every Sunday morning, and I read the story, which got me so excited about being in a radio station and having my own radio. So at home, I got a cassette, and I would record myself talking, and then I would press another cassette player to play a song. I'd say, and coming up now, and then I'd get my talking and just put in the new music coming up just as I would talk over it and segue. I was so excited about doing this. And I only did like 10, 15-minute bits, when I was young. But yes, there we go. Did you
get famous? Like, did you have a following? Like, would people come up to you and say, "Are you the guy who reads the stories on Sunshine Club?" Or
well, a little bit. I went with Mum to visit some of the children sometimes. Like, there was one family with 3 kids who were big, passionate listeners, and I went with Mum to visit them. She did like a special visit to have a cup of tea, stuff like a celebrity, and I was there too.
Right.
And
so your mum was the real celebrity.
Oh well, yeah. I was merely an elf to her Santa Claus.
Okay. I tell you what, though, I've just realised the best possible use of Anchor for you, and that is, like, if you took all this microphone equipment and computers and tried to explain podcasts to your mum, I think her brain might explode. But you could just go around to her house with your phone with like an Anchor, and there could be Tim's mum channel, and you could just hold the phone in front of her and say, "Just tell me a story." And your mum's such an interesting storyteller. Like, she could have her own little Anchor channel, and then people who are on Anchor could listen to her and follow her feed, and it'd be like, thought of the day with Tim's mum. I would follow that.
Well, it's.
Could your mum work a smartphone? Like, could she work an app, or is this too much even for your mum? Like, this is painfully easy, this app, but I think your mum's like.
I think she could. She can text and she can use a DVD player. She doesn't have a smartphone, but I think she's ready for a smartphone. And if I tell her this is how you use it, she'll click her way through it.
Oh man, imagine your mum let loose on Anchor.
Wow.
We do have like an Anchor channel ourselves for the Unmade podcast. So you can either go to anchor.fm and just find out stuff, or you can go to anchor.fm/unmade-podcast. I think that's our channel, anchor.fm/unmade-podcast. And we will put a sample recording on our Anchor channel, as bonus material. I've actually got an idea I haven't told Tim about yet of what we're going to put on our Anchor channel. So go to anchor.fm/unmade-podcast. I honestly, I know this is like a paid ad, fair's fair, but I honestly hope this thing takes off, because I can really imagine having quite a lot of fun with the different experimental type of podcasting you could do by being so portable. Because one of the problems with podcasting for me is how unportable it is. Look at us, we're sitting here in Tim's lounge room with all of this equipment around us, we're very unportable. But being able to go around to interesting locations and just record little samples of audio on the spot, be able to clip it all up and put it together into shows, it's it's a good innovation. I hope they're successful, and thank you to them for supporting the podcast.
Absolutely, check it out, Anchor.
And now back to the Sunshine Club. Something that seems to be happening to me a lot as we make this show, Tim, and that is I have a list of ideas that I think are pretty good, but about 5 or 10 minutes before we start recording, a new idea, half-baked, pops into my head. But because it's a new idea, it's the one that I'm excited about, because it's shiny and new.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with my new idea rather than my bankers on the list. But it does mean I haven't quite formulated it fully.
Well, help me be the midwife to this idea, man.
Okay.
Robert, come along.
Here she comes. The start of this idea, our working title for it is, "What's the weather like?" And it would be a weekly discussion, between you and I, where we would discuss what the weather has been like for the last week where we are.
Right.
So, what's the weather like today in Adelaide?
It's a bit cloudy.
Yeah? Was it hot?
No, but it's been hot for the last few days. And so people, you sort of still have the hot mentality. And so it doesn't feel as cool as it probably was today, because you've still got the house sort of, open, and you still got shorts out. And
yeah.
So you're sort of in the afterburner of some hot weather. But it's cloudy, but it's not too hot. I went for a ride this morning quite early. Yeah, it was 17 or 18.
You see, I think you and I are maybe not quite yet of the age, or maybe we're not of the mentality. And it's maybe also a bit less of an Australian thing to talk about weather. Mm-hmm. But I find people love talking about what the weather's like. In England, people will talk about the weather for a good solid 15, 20 minutes all the time.
Wow.
And you could live 100 miles from someone and phone them up, and it will be what's the weather like there? And they will describe it in detail, and then you will compare it in infinite detail with what the weather's like where you are. Pretty much in the same climactic system.
Wow.
Has it been raining there? Oh, yeah, it rained for about 15 minutes, but it was quite heavy, and then it got lighter, and now it's a bit patchy, but I reckon there's more rain coming. And then someone will say, oh, yeah, I reckon we got that rain about an hour later, because it's just hit here and it's quite hard. But this morning was glorious sunshine. So the premise on the surface is to talk about what the weather's like where you are, right? And I think in itself that could be quite funny if it's done by the right people. But then the idea would also be to have guests on the show, just to have guests to talk about, who they are or what they're doing. But a big part of their discussion, like the first part of their discussion, would be them discussing what the weather's like where they are. So, today we've got, my friend Destin from Alabama's on the show. He's going to tell us all about what he's been up to with rockets and stuff. But first, Destin, what's the weather like in Alabama? and we have like a week, we have 5-10 minutes talking about the weather. Oh yeah, what's the weather normally like that time of year? Is that unseasonal or and what are the winters like there? So you really interview people in depth about the weather, and then their weather stories. Where have you been lately? Oh yeah, I just went to Barbados. Oh really? What was the weather like there? And so you're always talking about the weather. But then I think the podcast would evolve into a point where you become a little bit like weather obsessed, and you start learning about weather and why the weather does what it does. So it becomes almost like this journey of discovery about weather. But then also, as it became bigger, it could become, I don't know, the way I imagined it would be you'd have one homebody, like say there was Tim, who's always in Adelaide, talking about what's going on in Adelaide and what the weather's like. But the other person, like I could be like this roving reporter. I've done it, Tim. I've come to El Bayad in Algeria, where in 1979 they recorded the hottest temperature ever of 51.3 degrees Celsius. But today it's actually quite mild. It's 28. It's a bit cloudy on the eastern horizon. So you'd become like these like weather fanatics who go to places of famous weather. I'm at Cape Horn, or you start going to places of extreme weather, and maybe it could start becoming a bit more like geographical too now. I'm at the top of a mountain, or I'm at the Dead Sea, and you just become these like weather obsessed people, like weather tourists. But it all centers around these two guys obsessed with talking about weather.
This is one of those ideas then, as soon as you said it, I thought, no, this is not a good idea. But the more you've talked, and as I've thought about it, I've had lots of ideas, and I think there's actually quite a bit in this. But the overriding question that I have, and it's a question for the podcast, why is the weather the common denominator? There's a cliche that says if you don't have anything to talk about, well, you could always talk about the weather. In other words, it's the one thing you have in common with any stranger that you meet.
Yeah.
And so that on the surface might say, so therefore it's a boring topic for a podcast. But it's also something we're largely ignorant of as well.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, some people are obsessed with the weather and farmers and so forth, and they have maps, and they've got to be very careful because their livelihood depends upon it. But there are others who, most of us we want it to be a nice day.
You get your weather people on the news, and you get your ones who just tell you what the weather's going to be. But you also get those rare gems who, in a nice, digestible way, explain to you why the weather's going to do what it's doing. Not just say, oh, it's going to be cold because there's a low pressure cell over the Pacific, but they'll say, and what that means is all the air's rushing in and flowing this way and doing that, and or pulling up all this moisture from the sea. And I quite like having weather explained to me a bit. Coming to like the commonness of weather as well. It's not just that the weather is a common thread. Like, we all experience weather, unless we're like, someone who stays inside all their life. But it's not just that. The weather does affect us. It affects what we're going to do that day and what we're going to wear that day. So it's one of the few things that not only bonds us all because we all experience it, but it does affect us every day. I'm very affected by what happened in the cricket last night because I care, but my wife doesn't care. And she might care a lot about something that's happening at her work that I don't particularly care about. But the one thing we both care about is the weather, because we both have to go outside today and we need to know, do we need to wear a coat or not? It is a very bonding thing for humans.
You're saying there are those people who are weather obsessed as well. Like, you have those storm chasers, don't you?
Yeah.
People who chase storms and want to know when tornadoes are and get inside them and understand them. A bit like train spotters, but for storms.
But they're like obviously like the Indiana Jones of weather obsessives. But you also get the other end of the spectrum. Like, I had a friend's grandfather who was the most mild-mannered, gentle, lovely man you'd ever meet. But he was obsessed with the weather, and he had for every day of his life since he was old enough to be able to do it, like a young boy, kept exercise books of the weather each day, like a diary of exactly what the high and low temperatures were and the rainfall.
Kidding.
And like for Christmas, his family would get him like, the latest Rolls-Royce weather sensor that he could put out in the backyard and things like that, so he could have all the stats to and he was just obsessed with recording the weather. And another place where there's amazing weather recordings is the Royal Society, where I make these objectivity videos, and they've got shelves and shelves and shelves of handwritten daily weather recordings from amazing places all around the world. So that could be part of the podcast too. Like they've got, the other day I was looking at the handwritten weather recordings from like the seaside in Australia in the first few months that Europeans had arrived in Australia, and they were just recording the weather on the first days, and there they are, handwritten in these amazing old, documents and things. So that could be like an episode of our weather podcast. I like the idea of being like a weather tourist and traveling around the world to places where amazing weather happens.
Oh, well, I like the idea of that too. So this podcast is a good idea for those who are able to use it to travel around the world. There's no question.
Yeah.
The big overarching thing around the question of the weather as well is the subject of global warming and climate change and so forth as well.
Yeah, snooze.
I'm not saying that's necessarily something you want the podcast to be about, but it makes people more aware. It's a dimension of the weather conversation that probably wasn't there a decade ago. Because people are thinking, oh, it's warm today, but in their mind, I wonder if it's warmer, like is it unusually warm? In other words, is it normally this warm this time of the year? People start thinking, I think, in those terms.
Oh, don't go there. Don't go there. Like, don't get me wrong. I believe in climate change, but I'm not going to let it hijack my cool podcast about joking about whether it's raining in Adelaide.
I think there are, I'm sure, podcasts about climate change in itself, but it gives a longitudinal sort of like a historical perspective. Like, is the weather changing or is the weather the same all the time? Surely that's something that people who are interested in weather are interested in.
What's the coldest weather you've ever experienced?
That's a good question. The coldest weather. We used to have frosts where I grew up in country Victoria. So walking to school...
You're so Australian. The coldest weather's a frost.
I'm aware that you've been to base camp at Mount Everest. But I have never been... Let me make it clear. I've never been somewhere like extreme.
Right.
So I'm talking about... I was simply going to say walking to school in the shorts that my dad made me wear to primary school on a frosty morning in country Victoria is nothing to be sneezed at. But that's about as far as I go, I think.
Have you been in snow? Have you been in snow? Have you like skied?
Yeah. No, we have. We've been up. We used to go tobogganing a few hours from there as well, up into the mountains. So that's probably the coldest. So just sort of tobogganing sort of snow. Yeah, no colder than that. Have you been somewhere seriously cold?
I mean, like high up in the Himalayas is quite cold, especially at night. I remember a few very, very cold days and nights in Austria, in the Tyrolean mountains at Christmas. I've got some family from around there, so I used to go there for Christmas a bit, and I remember a few nights there feeling very, very cold. I am going to Antarctica next year, so I'm imagining that's going to break the record.
Yes, apparently it's cold down there.
I have heard. This is what I hear. There's no point asking you about the hottest days, though. I mean, you live in Adelaide, so you've had some real scorchios. The hottest days in Adelaide always happen when I come home, though. Every time I come home to visit Adelaide for a week or two, it like hits the mid-40s and you can't even go outside.
Yeah.
I think I bring the worst out of Adelaide weather.
Yeah, they mentioned that you're coming on the news now, and people start preparing ahead of time. Well, that's what happens when you build a city like on the edge of a desert. It is the hottest continent on Earth, and it's the hottest part of, or not the hottest part, the centre is the hottest part, but Adelaide is the driest part of it, certainly. But we get up to 45 degrees, Celsius, obviously, and it'll stay like that for a week, even overnight. So you go outside and it's 45 Celsius, and that's just incredible.
I mean, 45 is too hot, and obviously 45 at night is too hot. But the one thing I miss about Adelaide the most is warm nights. That's the best thing about Adelaide is warm nights. Being able to go out at night just in shorts and a T-shirt and go to a restaurant or something. And
go for a swim, even down the beach.
Yeah.
I've never done this myself, but folks just go to the sleep on the beach, like it's just so hot. You're just laying there and you're talking and then you wake up and it's morning. It's the same temperature.
A thing about weather, I don't want this to come across as a humble brag because it's not how I mean it. It's just it's a genuine observation. And that is, I now go to California a lot for work and spend large amounts of time there. And the weather in California is so perfect all the time that I genuinely find it boring. Like, I get bored by Californian weather. Oh, blue sky again, blue sunny day. Everything's perfect. And I long to get back to England where it's raining in the morning and freezing cold, and then you get 20 minutes of sunshine and maybe a bit of snow and then maybe a howling wind and then floods the next day. Like people joke about the British weather, but I genuinely miss it when I'm away. Like, I love the variety of British weather.
Yeah, variety is good. They seem to have that whenever you see that in I don't know it so well in California. In New York, they seem to have the extremes. I've been in New York. I go in the summer and it's very warm. It's nothing like Adelaide. It's just a warm day outside. And then at the opposite end of the year, it's snowing. And I think that kind of variety and fantastic seasons in between. You know what I mean? Like, you've got a real autumn.
Yeah,
that
cool.
is fantastic. One more observation is we too tend to define a city a little bit by their weather. Like, people talk about Melbourne having 4 seasons in one day, and there's Is it Chicago is the windy city?
Where you're from in like central Victoria, like Traralgon, what is that? Is that known as the sometimes frosty morning town?
That's right. That's what it's legendary for.
Oh, those frosty mornings.
I used to think it was pretty perfect. I mean, it's warm enough to swim in the summer, and then it's sort of frost in the morning. I only remember that because you don't get the frost in the morning in Adelaide. It's just never that cold.
I think about my times in Adelaide, like, because Adelaide's super hot in the summer, and I now have a job where I never wear, like, a shirt and tie and formal clothes like that. And I look at, like, business people who have to wear business clothes in the hot of Adelaide, and I think, oh, how do they do it? How do they manage? But then I think, I worked for like about 7 or 8 years in a job in Adelaide where I had to wear like a shirt and tie every day. And I don't remember the problems I had with the extreme heat and wearing a shirt and tie. The thought of it now fills me with like this awful dread, but I obviously coped. Like, I don't remember it being like a problem.
Maybe we get more sensitive to it as we get older. But you're also in an air-conditioned building the whole day.
Yeah, but I was an adventurous journalist who was going out and, having adventures. Not really, I was just sitting in the office. I guess I was just sitting in the office waiting for a press release.
You do, I guess you work during the day and you don't notice it as much, but it is unbearable. Back in the late 90s, I remember saying, I moved to Melbourne, as you know, and I remember sitting there and going, I'm not doing another summer like this. This is too hot.
So you left Adelaide for a year because it was too hot?
No, part of the reason, I left because of work and all sorts of things, but I do remember thinking, I don't want to live here. Like, I don't want to go through another summer like this. That may have something to do with the poor air conditioning at my parents' house. It's my frugal parents and living with a fan. And we had this air conditioner and you had to pour buckets of water into the back of it like every hour or so.
And one of you had to be pedaling all the time to keep it going.
That's right.
Outside. All right, Tim, it's your hour out in the 45 degrees to pedal to keep us all cool.
Maybe it's the sweat of that person which fuels as the water that goes into fuel to cool the people inside. I remember sitting in front of that thing, like directly in front. It's like the TV's there, then the air conditioner's there. It's blowing directly at me and just going, this thing is broken. It's broken, I swear. And it was doing nothing.
It's a hot place, Adelaide. Anyway, so there we go. A podcast discussing weather. Let's do it.
There we go.
Tim, we have a second sponsor. We're spoiled today. And this sponsor is Brilliant. Brilliant.org/unmade is where we want people to go. This is like a website service that's educational, and it's supposed to help you understand the hidden beauty of things like mathematics, science, and physics, all those things that I love. And over the years, I have been unsuccessful in conveying to you why you should be into these things as well. Because, let's be honest, you're more of a humanities man, aren't you?
I am. So Brilliant is attempting to do what you have failed to do.
It is, and I think it has much more chance of succeeding because, well, it's really well done. So I've actually opened up Brilliant in front of us here. And what they do is they have like these little, they're like, would you call them like courses or lessons or little run-throughs you can do about all sorts of different things to do with like mathematics and probability and astronomy. Basically, what is good about Brilliant as opposed to, say, watching YouTube videos? And don't get me wrong, I'm 100% in favour of people watching YouTube videos
I believe
to learn stuff because I make YouTube videos. But what's good about all of these is it's interactive, and you as someone who's really into education as well, I guess, would know that rather than just being spoken at or just reading, a really good way to learn something is to be a little bit interactive with it. And that's what Brilliant's all about, whether it's the mathematics or the science and stuff. It's all about getting you to be constantly interacting with what they're trying to teach you and help you understand.
Yeah, I like this. This is good. So it's step by step all the way through. So you're learning, micro bits of data as well as big picture stuff.
Yeah, and I think each step is building on what you learned in the previous step. So they're gradually building you up.
It's really funny when you go through life and education, because there are things you have to learn to do the things you want to do.
Yeah.
And then there are things that you just want to know. And I can't tell you how many times I was having a conversation with someone recently who's just suddenly said he wants to do a science degree. And I said, why? And he says, because I'm just so interested in science. People just want to learn for the sake of learning.
That's what I think brilliant's really good for. I mean, you're not going to get a PhD at the end of this because it's like it's a thing on a computer that anyone can do. But you'll come out the other end knowing more about something. And I think if I wanted someone to understand some of what excites me about mathematics and problem solving and things like that, this is one of the places I'd send them. Like some of these look really good fun. Some of these little featured courses they've got here, the joy of problem solving, physics of the everyday, just mathematical fundamentals, logic, games of chance.
Chance, yeah.
The one on number theory I really like, and for people who like my number file videos, their number theory course is really good. I've done lots of that one. Is this bringing back a lot of memories to high school? And
It is.
Yeah.
And also...
And watching all the people who were good at maths through the window while you were doing other lessons.
In drama.
Yeah, while you were acting.
The other reason why this is of interest is because, obviously, well, I have children who are studying at the moment. And so they are moving into the stages of maths and physics and so forth, which are around the borders of my knowledge already.
Yeah.
And so I'm learning, okay. Firstly, I'm learning things from what they're learning. But secondly, it's the idea of, okay, let me get across probability. Or that's interesting. I'm going to look on probability so that I can help them.
Some of these might be very handy for you. So you might want to be dipping into this. So anyway, people can go and have a look. Brilliant.org. But if they use the magic URL, which is brilliant.org/unmade, the first 200 listeners to the Unmade podcast will get 20% off. 20% off if you use brilliant.org/unmade. Oh, look, they've got the Monty Hall problem here. Do you know the Monty Hall problem?
No, I don't.
This is good. This is brilliant, dare I say it.
There are two goats and a car.
Yeah. Yeah, but basically the Monty Hall problem is you have 3 doors, and behind 2 of them are goats that you don't want. That's like a lose. And behind another one is a sports car that you want to win. And all the doors are closed. And then you choose a door, right? Okay, I'll choose door 1. Yep. I don't know what's behind it. And then Monty Hall, who's the host of the program, says, okay, I'm not going to tell you what's behind the door you chose. I'm going to open one of the other 2 doors to reveal to you a goat. So he'll say, okay, I'll open door 3, there's a goat. So there are still 2 closed doors, the one you chose and another one. You still don't know what one the car's behind. Will you now stick with your original choice and say, well, okay, I'll stick with what I had? Or will you switch to the other door and think, I'm going to change my choice? He says you can change doors now if you want. Do you want to change to the other door? Or do you want to stick with the door you had?
So I've got to think about, does that increase
Yeah.
knowing the information
Yeah,
about
plus-
the third door?
So it's like, do I just stick with what I had? Because what's the difference? It's still, now it's just a 50-50 chance. Or do you switch? It's a very famous problem in mathematics, and people...
Is there an answer to it? I mean, it would just seem like it's purely... On a factual basis, it's a 50-50 choice. But is the question going to my psychology of whether I believe or think or feel that it's going to be...
Tell you what, you go to brilliant.org/unmade. Go into their... What course are we in here?
Brain warping probability.
Yeah, games of chance, brain warping probability. And you can do the course through a series of questions, and it will hold your hand through the Monty Hall problem.
I'm going to do that. I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued.
Look, I've got something here. I'm not sure it's a really great idea, but there is an idea in it.
Let's find that idea.
Okay.
Let's work together. Let me be the midwife this time.
It's called my bottom 5.
Yep.
Now, everyone's familiar with the concept of a top 5, right?
Yep. Yep.
But this is my bottom 5.
Yep.
And I guess it's a diversion or an adaptation of, or an adaptation rather, of one of my favourite podcasts, which is the very classic English show, Desert Island Discs.
Yeah.
Where someone chooses their, I think it's 7 favourite songs that as they tell the story of their life, right?
Yeah.
And this is basically their bottom 5. So in other words, they give 5 songs, although I'm happy to divulge it. It could go into other genres as well, but they're the worst songs.
Okay.
The songs they don't want to hear again.
Yeah.
And they talk about them, and they talk about why they find it so aggravating and frustrating.
Oh, so it could be that it's like just a bad song, or it could be that it's like a really bad memory, like it was
That's right.
the first dance at a wedding that didn't work or something like that. Or...
That's right. There are sort of those earworm annoying songs, those phenomenal songs. I'm thinking about things like the Macarena, or, you know, those songs that catch on, or Gangnam Style. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who are just like,
yeah,
oh, I just never want to hear that again.
I like it. Like 5 songs that if they come on the radio, you would turn off.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And why? And you talk in between. I mean, you just list them, but you got to say why. So you've actually got to stop and listen to it again, and you got to think about it. Why don't I like this? As you say, for sometimes it's the song itself, the aggravating sound or the obnoxious lyric or whatever. But other times it's like, this is my first breakup, or, you know what I mean? This is something I heard when this happened, or...
Oh, I think that's a fantastic idea, Tim.
You're just not usually this complimentary of my ideas, and
Well, normally your ideas aren't that good.
I don't have a barometer of what's a good or bad idea anymore. I just have ideas, and
I am that barometer, Tim.
You are those. Unfortunately, by the time you hear it, it's too late. It's out there.
I think I really love this idea. Can you tell me some of the songs that might get into your bottom 5 and why?
I do. And you know what? There's the one that comes immediately to mind when I thought of this idea. I don't know why it came immediately to mind. It's not prominent in my life. It's just a song that annoys me. And it's a song by the band Blondie called Heart of Glass. Are you familiar with the song?
I love that song.
I quite like other songs by Blondie. I have nothing against Blondie.
Yeah.
There's something, I guess I've just heard it once too many times or something.
Okay.
But there's something about how high her voice is and the way she says it. And honestly, it's not even that I don't like it when I hear it. When I thought of this list, that song popped into my head.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah. So Blondie. So that's Heart of Glass. So I find that song annoying. Another one is, there's a whole range of those sort of songs that are, they're sort of in those American college-y kind of movies. And like Who Let the Dogs Out and the Blink-182 kind of songs of All the Small Things. There's all that Wheatus song, Dirtbag. There's a whole range of those.
You're basically just listing my top 5, it sounds like.
Just ticking them off in front of you, aren't you? Yep, love that.
Who doesn't love Teenage Dirtbag? And All the Small Things.
It's sort of like a whiny singing. Green Day's in there too now, I think. I used to quite like Green Day years ago, but there's something, I hear another, it's like that voice again, kind of whining, and it's too slick, but it's trying to be rock, and I don't know, there's something about that. Anyway, but look, I'm cheating because I'm giving a whole list of things when really you need to nail it down to a particular song, and I could do that if I prepared and then talked about the quintessential one.
Have you got any songs that would make the list because of like specific memories, like they're attached to a memory?
No, I don't. Something may come to mind. Well, you give me some and give me time to think.
You're sending me into a nostalgic spiral here, but one song that I do have like burned into my memory in like a bad way was, do you remember the song "To Be With You" by Mr. Big?
Yes, I do.
So I remember like at a point when we were in high school where that was like the cool song, and I quite liked it, like most people did.
Yeah.
And it was also a time when we had to learn the lines for the school play, and I hated learning lines, and I wasn't very good at it. And what I did was I made a cassette tape of my lines that I would listen back to, and then at the end of my lines, as like a little reward, that song would play, and I would listen to that song, and then I'd rewind the tape and listen to my lines again, and then that song, and like I would do that like 100 times till I learned my lines. So not only was I listening to that song lots and lots of times, but I was associating it with something I was finding quite unpleasant, learning lines. So that song has been very tainted by that experience, and I can't hear that song without picturing myself lying in my bed, back in high school, trying to learn the lines to this school play.
Why be alone when we can be together, baby?
Was it like you recorded your lines and then you put that song at the end as a reward? Or was it the more likely scenario where we recorded all these songs, or you have songs on cassettes you've recorded from the radio and you've recorded over and over them because we only didn't want to buy new cassettes, and your lines were over it, and then you finished your lines and then that happened to be the thing that was underneath?
No. It was deliberately put there as like a cherry, an incentive at the end. I mean, a lot of songs that make me feel like a little bit uncomfortable and embarrassed are songs from that time in life when, you would have a crush on a girl at school and you would associate some song with her that you were listening to on the radio, and now when you hear it, you think how pathetic and embarrassing you were as a hopeless, angst-filled boy that couldn't get the girl.
Yeah.
So lots of songs from that period make me feel like a little bit sheepish about like how embarrassing I was, like anyone is when they look back at what they were like when they were a teenager. So lots of sort of teenagey songs have that experience.
But they're kind of pleasant though, like, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it's a nostalgic.
Yeah,
it's
kind of. It's not like shame, but there is a slight sort of sheepishness, like, oh, I was a bit pathetic then, wasn't I? Like being too scared to phone the girl or something, and like, So some songs like that become a bit uncomfortable. I don't know if they'd make it into my bottom 5, but there are other songs, like for example, Champagne Supernova, which is a great song, was played at a funeral of a friend of mine who died way too young.
Yeah.
As great as that song is, I cannot hear that song now without remembering the last 5 minutes of his funeral and what a difficult time that was for all of us having just lost him. So
yeah,
funerals can co-opt songs. And again, I wouldn't make that a bottom 5 song because of it, but it is an example of a song linking up to a memory.
Yeah. There's I know that experience too, where there's something that's heavy. You just if a song comes on, it's like, no, I just can't listen to that right now. You know what I mean? I can't go to that place now. It's associated too deep. Yeah.
It was a terrible mistake putting the sofa shop jingle in our last episode of the Unmade podcast, because now I can't, because now the sofa shop, along with plethora other advertising tunes from our youth on Australian TV, once they get back into your head, they're very hard to get out of. I haven't had the sofa shop jingle out of my head since that episode.
I am exactly the same. It was never in there. You've put it in there.
I'm sorry. Do you know what's worse? I'm going to do it again.
What, right now?
Yep.
The sofa shop is your only stop for the sofa you need.
Writing jingles, man, these guys are good. If they get an earworm like that.
Did I ever tell? I'm sure I told you the sort of story about that sofa shop jingle. When I was working at the Advertiser, which is the newspaper in Adelaide, we were talking about jingles from our youth. Obviously, that one came up. But being a bunch of journalists, like, we weren't going to let it go at that. And I actually spent like the rest of the day researching. This is before the internet, so it wasn't that easy. And I made lots of phone calls and called around. And by the end of the day, I was on the phone with the guy that wrote the sofa shop jingle.
Wow. Did you meet him?
I didn't meet him in person, but I asked him about like the writing of the song. And I was like, can you tell me why you wrote it and what your thinking was? And he was like, oh yeah, I just remember I went and met with the people at the sofa shop and they didn't really know what they wanted. But all they wanted people to know was that it was possible for them to sell you a sofa that would also match your curtains. So there's that line in the song that says, choose your sofa, match your curtains too.
We have a sofa designed for you. Choose your fabric, match your curtains too.
Because that was the only thing they wanted to be in the song. They wanted to sell this curtain sofa package. So that was the only line that he knew he had to get in there.
Did you ask him the artistic questions like, hey, does the lyrics come first or the music, or do you just do a John Lennon, you sit down at the typewriter and open a vein,
I wonder, like, in 20 years when this podcast about the bottom 5 gets made, how many people's bottom 5 the sofa shop jingle will be in. Good idea. Good podcast idea. Great podcast idea.
Let me put this out there. This is just to get some hostility, because I think when you have a bad song by a great artist, it sort of clangs even more. Like, you find it, like, you'll play an album and you'll skip a particular song because it's like, I just can't do that song, but I really like this artist. If I don't hear Hey Jude ever again, I'll be reasonably happy about that. Hey Jude by the Beatles.
It's a great song.
I know it's a great song. I'm not going to dispute it's a great song. It's about 2 minutes too long, and I don't need to hear it again. I just don't need to hear it ever again.
You're such a snob. You're just a music snob. Like, you just don't like stuff when it's famous.
That's ridiculous. I've just said that I I've just said that the Beatles are great, and I've just said that their stuff is great. Of course, I love the Beatles in so many other ways. Revolver is one of my favourite albums. Eleanor Rigby is one of my favourite songs, but I don't need to hear Hey Jude again.
Guess what I'm about to play?
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
Hey Jude and the Sofa Shop. Just some, just a wonderful, wonderful combination. It'd be wonderful to hear them side by side and just to see compare the melodies.
They are two songs I never thought I would hear referred to in the same sentence.
No, they're not.
If that jingle guy could hear this podcast now, he'd be so proud.
He would.
Yes, my Sofa Shop jingle has been compared to Hey Jude on a podcast recently.
What podcast? They say, the bottom 5 people that I hate most of the world. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Then you begin to make it better.
Yeah, okay, so I think that's got some ideas. So again, once it's a chance for people to talk, you can play the song or a snippet of the song. But it's a chance for people to also talk about their lives and, like you said, like memories as well.
Of course. So Tim, I tell you what, I haven't decided what my final idea is, but there is one on my list that I feel like we've gotten close to discussing this. So rather than like burning another really good idea in this episode and probably not being able to use my idea now ever again, let me tell you this other idea I had, and we'll kind of continue this discussion, and I'll make this my podcast idea.
Okay.
Because my podcast idea, and I tell you what, if you think dissing Hey Jude is controversial, wait till you hear this idea. My podcast idea is called Doctor Who is Rubbish.
Wow.
It's basically a podcast about discussing things that loads and loads of people think is really, really good.
Yeah.
That you think is rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Doctor Who is top of my list. Because like so many people love Doctor Who, and they're the sort of people who are like my work. They're sort of my people.
Yeah.
So I feel like I should be a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah.
Because everyone who kind of, watches my videos and listens to podcasts and people I'm friends with and things like that love Doctor Who. And I've tried, and I just think it's rubbish.
I can relate to you. My attachment to Doctor Who, before we get to the general concept, which I think is a really good concept for a podcast.
Yeah.
Doctor Who, I remember loving it as a kid. Like it was mysterious as a child. Like it was on after school, and I remember thinking, and so I've got Tom Baker in my mind and the scarf. It wasn't quite as exciting as Star Wars, but something was going on and I watched it and there it was. But I've tried to watch it as an adult because I have friends people I love and respect who love it.
Yeah.
And I can't do it. I don't see it. It just seems ridiculous.
But I know it's got higher production values now, but going back to those days when we were school kids watching it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think even back then, I was tuned into the cheap crapness of it.
Yeah. I know the example that's coming. Come on.
Oh, yeah. They're obviously the example we often discuss of, using cricket equipment painted silver to make people look like robots, wearing cricket pads and cricket gloves. But beyond that, like, because Doctor Who was like a little bit edgy, right? But we were still allowed to watch it as kids. So it felt like it was close to the forbidden zone. It was on at a time when we could watch it like on TV before bed and when we were allowed to be watching TV. So it was in our sweet spot. And I should have loved it. And lots of people my age do love it for that reason. But even then, I felt like I should like it, but I just couldn't get into it.
Oh, you didn't like it as a kid either? Yeah,
I didn't like it as a kid even. Even as a kid, I thought I'd sit there watching it thinking I should like this, but I just would rather go out and watch cricket.
Yeah.
It's never worked for me. And I know the reboot is very different from the old days.
Yeah.
And I've watched some of the reboots, and whenever there's a new Doctor, I'll watch the first few, and I'll watch a few Christmas specials, and sometimes I think, oh yeah, that was mildly entertaining, but I just cannot get into it. And I think it's really, really overrated, and the mad fandom for it baffles me somewhat.
But mad fandom is a little bit like that, isn't it? Oh, you know what I mean? Like you could say, well, you can't say quite the same thing for Star Trek because I probably have a stronger appreciation. I can sit down and watch an episode of Star Trek. Yeah, the Doctor Who, I would never think of putting it on. Not anymore.
It has always felt like a show, and I know there are people who will say this is the strength of it, but it always has just felt to me like a show that doesn't quite know what it wants to be. Am I serious? Am I funny? Sometimes it's just a bit wacky and madcap. but other times it's dealing with like, the end of the world, and it's just never meshed together for me. And I respect other people like it, and I'm well aware there are things that I love that people really, really dislike. So, so please don't all pile on me, and also don't feel the need to tell me why Doctor Who is good, because I won't believe you. But also like, it is what it is.
Would it be helpful if they tweeted you regularly about their excitement regarding Doctor?
Yeah, that'd be great. Do go to the Reddit. There'll be a subreddit for this episode, like there is for every episode.
Yeah.
And you can go on there and tell me what you like about Doctor Who. I have watched Doctor Who. I just think it's not for me. So that's the title of the podcast. It's obviously just being provocative, calling it Doctor Who is rubbish. But there are other things that people like that I think are rubbish, or that you might think are rubbish. Or you could have guests come on the show. It's a bit like, there's the TV show Never Seen Star Wars, which just uses having not seen Star Wars as the premise for other mainstream things you've never experienced. So I guess this is kind of a tweak on that. This is things that people think are really popular, like the song Hey Jude, that you just can't get into.
Hey Jude is an exception, because I have liked it for many years. It's just I'm done with it. There's not enough in it to go around.
Okay, that doesn't count then.
There is a way in which your podcast idea, it could be hijacked into a snobbish tone.
Yes.
Like it could be I don't understand why everyone likes this. And that's not going to be fun. It's to find, I think, its rhythm. It's got to genuinely be a baffling question. In other words, I don't understand. Like, tell me why this is enjoyable. That and it's, you know what I mean? So it's got to be done in that sort of frank honesty.
It will probably work best if one person on the show is the don't like it and the other person on the show is the do like it.
Yeah.
I mean, relationships and marriages and things like that are full of these little sticking points, like movies like, The Princess Bride, which I think is a great film, but my wife just doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Also, like the band U2, my wife just does not understand the appeal of.
Right. Okay.
Things like that. So there are various things like that. Is there anything that lots of people like that you genuinely just have never understood and don't think is very good?
I do. Well, I resonate a little bit with the Doctor Who one that I've said. I'm trying to think of. For most of my life, I never got into Star Trek, so I didn't understand it. I never got it. I didn't know the worlds and the rules within the worlds. And then somewhere along the line, I watched one of the new TV reboots, and it's just I was talking to someone about this recently. It's just a really pleasant, calm thing to watch. Like no one's getting too upset. It's a very clean, nice environment. And it's reassuring, and so it's sort of like a nice place to be for a little while.
In the 1990s, I went through a stage of getting really into Star Trek Voyager.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
With Captain Janeway.
Yeah.
And I remember I had like a week off work, and it was really hot, so I didn't want to go outside. And this was in the days of like video stores, and they had the entire series on VHS. And I think it would be like 2 episodes per cassette, or maybe 3 episodes per cassette. And I was going to the store and hiring like 2 or 3, going home, watching them, and then that afternoon I was returning them to the video store and getting another 3, and I was doing it like every day. And I think the video store people must have thought I was such a saddo, because it was in the middle of the day, and I was coming in twice a day and hiring all these Star Trek VHSs. And
you were like a binge pioneer.
It was binge watching before you could binge watch, so you had to actually go to the video store and hire all these cassettes. There was a shelf of them like as far as you could see, and I was just like taking them by the handful. Here's another $10. I'll be back in a few hours for more.
I tell you what I don't see the appeal of is the endless Marvel comic films. And I have, again, friends and colleagues, and you might say, well, they're for younger people or they're for children, but it's not. It's absolutely not. The age range goes all the way through of Iron Man, and other names don't come to mind. Honestly, that I love them, that are superhero movies. I don't get it.
They're getting worse too. That's how I know I'm getting old, though, and turning into my dad. Because I went and watched that Superman reboot where the last 30 minutes is them just having this huge fight destroying a city or something.
Is that him and Batman?
No, this was just, I haven't dared see the Superman Batman one. It was just the latest Superman reboot with the current Superman. And the first half of it was all right, but the second half, I was just like, does there just have to be so much violence? there's just so much fighting. And
Can't we just talk about this?
But my problem is, and this is how I know I'm an old man, my problem isn't with the violence, it's with the mindless violence. Like a really confronting piece of violence, like a torture scene or something, really disturbs me and affects me, but it moves me as well. But this is just mindless violence where they're just throwing each other into buildings and like destroying an entire city in some frivolous way that's almost doesn't add anything to the story. Like true mindless. And I'm like, oh, it's just all this mindless violence. It adds nothing to the film, and I like huffed out like a 80-year-old.
They're not showing the consequences of it all. I have to add this in because I have people I work with and people that I know and are colleagues and friends and so forth who love these films, and I respect them and love them, and I don't disparage them. I just don't get it. They don't. No. They don't. And I'll tell you what it is. It doesn't do it for me because it's not. It sounds crazy, but it's not true. So they don't abide by laws that I can relate to. You know what I mean? Like the laws, like he can fly. So therefore, it doesn't matter what happens in the film because quite patently we can't fly, and so it's not true. And so I can't connect to it anymore.
Do you like Harry Potter? Because you look like him.
I did enjoy. I read the first 3 books and I did quite enjoy them. But I have to say the part I enjoyed was the sort of the English boarding school relationship kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The magic stuff. And as soon as it moved into, well, this law and that law and then a new character and this, I just got bored.
Yeah, you just wanted to find out who's going to end up with who. And
well, no, it's just more the relationship. Like I was interested in his, their parents and him and the situation of being at school and, it's a new adventure and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't care what the Chamber of Secrets is or what the Philosopher's Stone is or the, you know what I mean? The supernatural, mysterious elements.
Yeah.
Because those are things that can be made up. So it doesn't connect for me. I did love Batman. In fact, if I was to name a favourite superhero, it would be Batman. Because of firstly the TV show when I was a kid, but then also the Batman movie, the first one in 1989. Yeah. Like that was bigger than anything in my neighbourhood in Traralgon.
That was awesome. That was bigger than that day when there was a frost and you had to wear shorts.
I know. It was worth being there in that frost just because Batman was coming out. Yeah. But that was huge. So there's an affinity with Batman. Yeah. But then he went through a bit of a weird period too, where suddenly George Clooney was Batman, and that doesn't make sense. And then Val Kilmer was Batman. And
then they thought, how can we make it even worse? Why don't we give it to Ben Affleck?
And then Ben Affleck, is he Batman now, is he?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's not good. Now I'm becoming quite protective of these superheroes. But apparently I'm indifferent too.
All right, well, there you go. Doctor Who is rubbish. It sounds like the problem's going to be coming up with enough things that we find rubbish. But that's what guests are for. You just troll around for guests or your friends and stuff for things that they don't like, and that's when you get them on. Like if you're talking to a friend one day and like he or she says, oh, you know what, I think the Beatles are crap, you'd say to them, well, you're coming on Doctor Who is rubbish next week and you can tell me all about it.
Yeah. So it is a contrarian kind of podcast as well, but it can't be, you know what I mean? Like it's got to be quite unique, their perspective. But they come in and everyone's got one thing, surely.
Yeah, and you need guests who are comfortable sort of putting their head above the parapet a bit and realising, look, I know that, because if the podcast is popular, you're going to get like every episode's going to cause a deluge of fans of the said thing. I tell you what, not to make a podcast about being rubbish, and that would be Roger Federer. Because Roger Federer, the tennis player, has the most rabid fans. And if anyone ever says anything negative about Roger Federer on the internet, the Fed heads will absolutely rip them to pieces. Oh, because I really like tennis.
No. What I mean, have you said? You've got personal experience. Have you done it?
Oh no, it's just a known thing to not criticize Roger Federer on the internet.
Oh really?
Because they're really rabid. So you would never go on and say like, oh, I think Roger Federer's backhand technique, I've just never liked it.
Overrated. 19 Grand Slams. But I tell you, he's one of those guys. He is pretty universally loved, but it sounds like he has some passionate fans. But you compare him to someone like Tom Hanks, who's also universally loved, but perhaps I don't think there would be quite the defensiveness of fans. Are there Hanks fans?
There would be from me. I bloody love Tom Hanks.
No, I like Tom Hanks too. I like Tom. I'm not sure I'm going to get on the internet.
Tim doesn't like Tom Hanks, everyone.
No.
Tweet Tim. Tell him what you think about Tom Hanks.
I don't. I bought his book of short stories the other day. Doctor Who is frozen in my mind as Tom Baker. It is Tom Baker, isn't it, with all the curly hair?
Yeah.
It's frozen in my mind. I'm vaguely aware that Tristan from All Creatures Great and Small, that character, or that actor was also the Doctor at a latter time, but I don't remember seeing those episodes. But I am aware of that. And then the other guy, the In the Thick of It guy.
We're on the 11th. I think we're coming up to the 11th now. So.
Oh, right. Well, I'll tell you two things. One is I remember with great enthusiasm. I had a really eccentric art teacher at school in primary school. You know, fantastic. She had all sorts of pictures of wizards and things everywhere, and she would let us chew chewing gum in the art room and, you know, use the paints. And she was just a wonderful teacher like that. She was obsessed with Doctor Who, and she claimed to have a VHS copy of one Doctor transforming into another Doctor. And I remember that was massive news in my primary school class. Like, wow. That's unbelievable. I didn't know it's never been on TV, or has it, or whoever knows. But Mrs. Elsie has a copy.
So the story was, it wasn't the story that she had like recorded that episode of TV. She just like witnessed it behind the bike sheds or something and filmed it on a video camera.
No, it wasn't. Yes, has Zapruder-like footage of Doctor.
Yeah, it wasn't even meant for broadcast. I just happened to see it when I was walking down the street.
Behind the scenes.
Pulled out my JVC Handycam and got an actual transformation on camera, like seeing Bigfoot.
No, she had it, but she wouldn't bring it to us, and that was to school. But that was, you know, part of her mystique, is that, wow, she has this footage of one Doctor changing to another. I remember that memory. The other thing about Doctor Who, there doesn't seem to, be any coherence in the rules of the world. And maybe there is, and I'm really inviting backlash now. But you know what I mean? Like, it feels like anything could happen at any time.
So if you're a Doctor Who fan and you know of any laws or rules or mythology surrounding the TV show, tweet Tim all about it so he can find it.
Don't you do a thing until you see the sofa shop.
Quick shout out to a patron who's supporting us on patreon.com/Unmade FM, because as is our fast-growing tradition, we do a shout-out to people who are chipping in and discuss some of their ideas. And today, Tim, I want to introduce you to Dakota, a third-year engineering student studying in British Columbia, another Canadian listener. And the idea that Dakota has had is a podcast, because Dakota's into like hiking and going for walks and stuff. Very fit person, obviously, much like you and I.
Yep.
So the idea for a podcast that Dakota has had is called Walk With Me. And Dakota says, my idea is to have a podcast that discusses the history, general information, and interesting facts about individual trails and the surrounding area, but to make it even more enjoyable to those who actually want to go out and experience the hike for themselves, the podcast would be set up so that it acts as an audio tour of sorts. As the listener was progressing along the trail, the podcast would give interesting facts along the way, such as the age of a nearby tree, information about long-abandoned mine shafts as you pass by. Since there will likely be downtime between interesting points of interest, that time can be spent discussing how the trail was developed, facts about potential nearby towns and forests, and things like that. So an audio tour, but for long hikes.
I've done these, and I imagine you have to inside buildings.
Yeah, you go to a museum and do an audio tour. But this is for a walking trail.
Wow. So this is more ambitious, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I see the value of it as like a resource if you're doing the walk. But it seems to be that Dakota's thinking this could also be something that people who don't do the walk could listen to. So I think he wants it to appeal to both. He wants it to appeal to people who are just lying in bed imagining doing the walk. And I'm not sure how that would work. Like hours and hours of...
Well, I imagine you've got to be talking all the time to do that. Saying, I'm now passing this and I can look at the vista. And whereas when you're actually on the walk, you don't necessarily want someone describing and commentating your walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Is it grabbing you, the idea?
It's one of those that doesn't grab me, but I know people that I think would really like this idea. Maybe there could be two versions of each
Be
one.
nice, because Dakota will cancel his Patreon otherwise.
Yeah. Actually, I do think it's a great idea. I do think that some people would find this really appealing. I like the idea. There could be two. You could have a minimal version. So you walk along with facts and information about certain things along the way. Or there could be one that's like, take the virtual walk, and you could walk the Hasten Trail or whatever and be listening to a virtual description of the beauty. People read books and appreciate literature that goes to great lengths to explain the beautiful vistas and surroundings, and you feel like you're there. Why wouldn't podcasts do the same thing?
I think there's an idea in there somewhere. When I read the title, Walk With Me, I thought it was going to be like a two people talking type podcast, but while on a walk.
Oh, yeah.
So like you both wear a microphone or hook up and then just walk along and talk about, so every week you're going on a different walk. Today, Tim and Brady walk to Everest Base Camp. Why don't you join them? And you just talk about whatever. But this sounds like Dakota wants to make something that has real utility. So, anyway.
There could be something, the tourism industry might find it helpful or to experiment. This sort of thing may exist in some form already, like as in points of information. Press 2 when you arrive at the old mine shaft and listen.
I just had an idea. For a podcast. Like, based on what Dakota's doing, a podcast that is an audio tour of the world.
Okay, more information?
The whole world. So, like, you just start somewhere. Like, now if you walk, like, to your left, you'll see the airport. Why don't you go and fly to Melbourne? And then when you get to Melbourne, it's like, now you're in Melbourne. To your right, you can see these hills. And like, it's an ambitious project. Don't get me wrong. But imagine that, imagine having that loaded on your phone. Audio tour of the whole world. No matter where you are, it just knows where you are and just starts audio touring you.
It's like an audio lonely planet, but it walks through. Yeah. So would you tell it in real time? Would you, in other words, okay, move ahead now, and when you get to the bottom of this freeway?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it, and this is just supposed to be a promo for the Patreon, so maybe we should move. Patreon.com/unmadefm if you want to chip in $1 or $2 to help us put these together. And even if not, thank you for listening, but especially thanks to Dakota for sharing an idea. Walk with me. We will walk with you, Dakota. We'll walk with you.